Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome once again to Orange Weekly, presented by Crouse Health. We are live here on the Syracuse Orange football Facebook page. We're live on the Syracuse Orange basketball Facebook page and our Syracuse Orange sports page on YouTube. Those of you watching us live, great to have you on board. Thanks for coming by. You can offer your questions and comments as we go along here in the comments section, and we'll follow along on that. And you guys can have your own conversation while we're chatting here. But for those of you not live, thanks for watching later on YouTube. Just so you know, we put Orange Weekly on our Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page. We'll send it out on social media, and there'll be a post up on syracuse.com just in case you can't be here. We like to do Orange Weekly, usually Thursdays about 1 o'clock or so. We've got two guests joining us today. One right here on your screen who we'll talk to in just a moment, our friend Nate Mink from syracuse.com, who of course is a football beat reporter. Joining us in a little bit will be our friend Mike Waters from syracuse.com to recap a wild 2-overtime Tuesday night affair against Indiana. Kind of look ahead to what's ahead for the Orange. No rest for the weary on the basketball side, as the schedule still has a lot of name brand teams up ahead here. So we'll talk to Mike a little bit later on here in the show. But Nate is here, and Nate, while football season is over and the Orange finished 5-7, still plenty of work to be done. Still a lot of things to track for this football team. And first of all, welcome. Great to have you back, my friend.
Thanks. Got my booster a couple days ago, so I'm boosted up and ready to go full steam ahead into what has already been a hectic, busy offseason.
It really has, Nate. It's been crazy to watch, and we'll get into the transfers and kind of what the offseason could look like here for Syracuse football. Signing day is next week, so speaking of no rest for the weary, we're just cranking it out here, even with the season over. But let me just backtrack a little bit here. You know, Syracuse goes into that last game against Pittsburgh. They had to win to go to a bowl game. Obviously, they don't. I never really believed there would be sweeping changes with the football team, notably the head coach. But, you know, we've learned you got to leave a small crack in the window for unknown, unforeseen things you don't expect. So that didn't happen. But Dino Babers did make some changes to his coaching staff. The transfer portal is wide open. Syracuse in the lead in terms of schools that have lost players to the transfer portal right now. And they got to hire a new offensive coordinator, defensive line coach, tight ends coach. Signing day next week, as we mentioned. So, a lot to take in there, Nate. But just tell me just what you were thinking when this all ended, the changes were made, and what you've taken in so far from the moves that have been made and the moves that need to be.
Well, one of those changes might be a special teams coordinator too. More to come on that. That's certainly an area that the athletic director and the head coach throughout the season has addressed and said needs to be addressed this offseason. So, we'll see what they decide to do with that spot on staff, that opening, that vacancy. But I think you gave a nice rundown, Brent. I mean, I think the headline certainly is the change at OC. I think, if we were sitting here a month ago, I don't know if there would be that many complaints about how things were rolling coming into that bye week on the heels of that 21-6 Boston College win. They were 5-4 at that point. The offense, while defenses by that point had started to maybe adjust a little bit to Syracuse's new offensive identity, they were still able to squirt out enough chunk plays in the ground game to maybe cover some of those warts in the passing game. But as the schedule tightened up in the last month of the season, and as you saw, again, defenses really lock in on how to defend Syracuse effectively, you never really saw, I thought, the in-game adjustments, the innovation, the creativity, the different types of ways you might want to look to get Sean Tucker the football a little bit more frequently in some of those games. And I think it all kind of came to a head, and that's why you saw, in effect, the change made you did at the end of the season. And so I think when you look at that vacancy this upcoming offseason, I think there's really, two questions Dino has to answer. One, does he want to take over play calling and then bring in a coach to essentially supplement him and aid in that effort, or does he not want to call plays, and does he want to hand it totally over to whoever the new play caller, the new offensive coordinator is? So I think it's a fluid situation. Certainly, I think the vetting process is only beginning to get underway. I think there's going to be a lot of names that you and I can throw out that on paper make a lot of sense. But I also think that we've seen in the past couple seasons that Dino has shown a propensity to look outside the family, be different, try to be different, try to turn to a style or a coach that he respects or his mentors in the profession respects. And so, frankly, I don't have a real good read on which direction he's going to go in. But I do think, at the crux of it, again, it seems like we talk about this every offseason. I think the number one task at hand here is being better offensively, being more consistent offensively.
They went into the portal last year to get Garrett Schrader, and as you mentioned, that was a change that worked. They had to go that route at quarterback. Things with Tommy DeVito just, for lack of a better term, kind of dried up. They went to this ground and pound approach. Schrader and Sean Tucker end up being one of the most prolific, run combos in the country in terms of touchdowns, yards, and almost any measurement there you want to go with. But certainly we saw the passing game suffer a little bit. I just highlighted a comment from Shelby there about Courtney Jackson, who had a great game in that final game against Pittsburgh and showed some flashes at the end of the year. But beefing up that passing game with or without Schrader is going to be a big priority. So what you talked about with play calling and what direction they go there is going to be interesting. And Nate, as you know, I mean, look, there's been a mixed bag there in terms of assistant coaches that Dino has had to bring in. While he did fire Brian Ward as defensive coordinator, he was also named assistant coach of the year at one point in his tenure at Syracuse, right? Sterling Gilbert, didn't work out after 2 years. Tony White has been brilliant, frankly, as the defensive coordinator and how he's turned things around. And, that's the way it goes when you're on watch for what will now be a 7th year as head coach. Some are going to work out, some are not. But the big thing you brought up there, Nate, was calling plays. And while we never really got to talk to Sterling Gilbert or don't talk to the assistant coaches, they're really not made available to the media. Dino is kind of the head spokesman in that way. How much input do you think Dino had on game day with Gilbert? How often is he stepping in, calling plays, doing the thing? Like, did he just kind of hand it over to Sterling from what you understand, or did he always kind of have his hand in matters, if you will?
I think he had a voice. I don't think Sterling had carte blanche on every play call for 4 quarters in all 12 games. I think Dino has a voice. I think Mike Schmidt had a voice at times. I think that's kind of Dino's style, is he'll seek out and call different opinions from various staff members on his offensive staff. But at the end of the day, he's also going to give agency to certain coaches and trust them and delegate and step in as needed. I think the thing you have to remember with any coaching staff, and Syracuse certainly isn't immune to this. It's a lot of it is tied to personnel too. And I think when you look at what Syracuse wants to do offensively in the RPO game, or what sometimes they term tags, which is essentially RPO, a big part of that offense is reading the safety. And if the safety sneaks down to play the run, to be able to have players on the perimeter who can run behind a defense, create separation, get open, and then have a quarterback who can deliver the ball on time and accurately. And I think it's all tied together between the receivers and the quarterback reading the same things defensively, the line having that protection intact, and then obviously the quarterback and the receivers have to execute the play, essentially make the throw, make the catch for it to all come together. And that's, I think, been in a nutshell a lot of the root issues here, the last few seasons. And so I think regardless of who the play caller is, they have to develop and continue to develop the talent that they have in the program. And then also if it's deemed not good enough to compete in the ACC, go out, pound the portal, develop the younger guys that they have in the program, and try to continually upgrade the roster.
Nate, one thing that has been fascinating in really both football and basketball and across the sports spectrum in college the last year is the transfer portal. And we're really seeing it amp up here. Now, I think they're counting a couple of players in this count, if you will, that were only around quickly. And I don't know if, we can argue about semantics about whether they should be included. But Syracuse is near the top of the list, and it sometimes leads the list of number of players that have left the program since August 1st. Now, again, not every one of those players went into the portal. They left the program. But no matter how you slice it, Syracuse is near the top of that list. Luke Benson and Adrian Cole, the latest two to go into the portal as we speak here. Maybe more will come as the days go by here. But as we speak, I mean, I've been pretty vocal about the use of the tight end at Syracuse, or lack thereof, and wasn't surprised to see that. But there's a lot of players they have to replace, Nate, and a lot of schools are going through this. They're not the only one, of course. But that's been something you've documented very well about this team, whether it's injuries, attrition, transfers. Syracuse just doesn't have the numbers, it seems, right? The depth has always seemed to be an issue with Dino Babers and this team by whatever reasons. And it feels like we're kind of at a pressure point with that again. So it's early, and Syracuse has made plenty of offers in the portal, right? But how aggressive do you think they have to be in the portal? And what's your read on the number of players that have gone into it out of Syracuse?
Well, I think, and Dino after the Pittsburgh game kind of countered the notion that, they've struggled building depth by saying that effectively they had gotten the roster in a much better place this season than it had been in years past, certainly in his earlier years when they ran out of bodies down the stretch. Last year, you almost have to just chalk it up as an anomaly because of all the injuries, all the attrition in that COVID year, where they were, under 50 guys on their roster, under 50 scholarship players on their roster, which is frankly just an untenable situation. But the thing that, Dino is certainly citing is that rule change that went into effect last spring that effectively abolished transfers having to sit out a year for the one time exception, and that changed the game remarkably and significantly in his eyes, where all that work he had done in previous years to develop a team and build up a solid two deep kind of went out the window. And we saw that with the midseason attrition. Certainly there are things that happened in season that are particular to Syracuse's cause. Losing your number one receiver is not about playing time. That is directly tied to choices that the coaching staff made that they deemed were in the best interest of the team and winning football games. So, it's certainly not all about, losing guys that are looking for more opportunities or looking for more playing time or were buried on the depth chart and weren't necessarily happy with their role, their playing time. But
Right.
but there's an element of that to that. And so, to kind of close the loop, I do think they are going to have to replenish the depth. I think the paradox here for me that makes this difficult, and I think Dino will acknowledge that this is difficult, is that Syracuse is a developmental program that is not routinely attracting 4 and 5 star recruits. So your best chances for success come down to senior laden veteran squads where guys have been in the same system, been with the same coaches year over year. And then you hope it all comes together like it did, say, I don't know, 3 years ago when they won 10 games with a senior quarterback and a lot of other senior pieces. Well, now the rules have changed to the point where you're more inclined, or you're going to see it. You're going to see some of those young underclassmen, frankly, leave rather than wait to develop and hit on maybe 1 or 2 years. Guys want to get on the field early. I was talking to Marlo Wax about this a little bit after the Pittsburgh game. Guys want to get to the league as soon as possible.
Mhm.
As soon as
Yeah.
possible. Cisco was a 3-and-out kid. Trill Williams was a 3-and-out kid. Michael Jones, 50-50 on whether he goes or stays, is probably going to be, or is at least entertaining the idea of being a 3-and-out kid. Whereas in a former life, your best chances for success were having, that linebacking core of Wax, Jones, Thompson be juniors and seniors. Well, now guys are doing what they think is in the best interest for themselves and wanting to leave. And sometimes that, hampers your ability to put the best product out on the field. And that, I think, is going to, that to me is what makes the job here challenging and difficult, is because you are not a blue blood like a Georgia, like an Ohio State, like a Bama, where you're going to be able to read load year after year. Your best chance for success is the Wake Forest model, is maybe the Pittsburgh model. And what do we see from those 10-win teams this season? Senior-laden teams, veteran quarterbacks, veteran coaching staff. And, that's the formula. And it's now more difficult than ever to replicate that formula given the rule changes we saw.
Well, and the irony with that, Nate, is that you want to sell that. Like, you're out there recruiting, you want to say, look, we put Trill Williams, Ife Melifonwu, Andre Cisco, when Mikel Jones goes to the NFL, when Garrett Williams goes to the NFL, right? You want to sell that to your recruits, but you just said it, the best formula for success is getting talented players like that to stay just that extra year and find that right combination. And Syracuse will be trying to find that right combination with signing day coming up, Nate. And one final thought for you before we let you go and bring in our friend Mike Waters to talk hoops. It's about a week away. The early signing period coming up. By rankings, it's not looking very good. We know rankings aren't everything, but you certainly don't want to be ranked last in the ACC by the measurement charts out there, the 247s of the world and Rivals and Scout and all those things. But what are your impressions of this class coming in and what stands out about it and what we could find out next week when it's a pen to paper, if you will?
Well, you hope you can get, again, out of the high school recruits that you sign, you hope you can get a few contributors that are ready to step in and play on the two deep. Certainly the ones that are looking at enrolling early in January stand the best chance at getting on the field early, cracking that two deep, and being able to contribute. If not on special teams, and perhaps in a rotational role like we saw, say, with Deuce Chestnut last year. I think, again, this is what's interesting is, like, there's no model for this yet. We don't know necessarily what industry standard is for how to navigate, roster management, roster construction since the rule change in the spring. This is all brand new. So in the past, you would see signing classes, you know, pretty much across the board have 20, 25 guys ready to sign by December. Right now, Syracuse has 10 guys committed to their class. And they're not the only program that has a small number of commitments right now. And the transfer portal changed the game. I think Syracuse is in a position where they can be patient. A lot of programs, I think, are going to be patient to see what the portal looks like, how fluid it looks, how it evolves over time. And then they're going to have to weigh, okay, is there a short-term solution here that makes a lot more sense than bringing in a high school prospect that we can develop over 4 or 5 years, knowing that they might not be patient and want to stick around for 4 or 5 years. I think it's so early, and this is still such a new rule change that, there's not enough data out there to know whether we're going to see literally hundreds, if not thousands, of players move into the portal year after year, like we're seeing this year, because it's brand new and we don't have that trend line, or we don't have that data. So, I think Syracuse is going to be aggressive in the portal. I think that's been telegraphed by the coach and the athletic director. I think, they're in a position that, if they're really going to push their chips all in this season, it has to be about constructing the best roster year to year. And I think that to me is going to be the biggest change in recruiting, is I think you're going to see a lot more teams really just look to flip it and worry about the roster year to year, rather than try to build and project out over 3 or 4 years. We saw kind of Michigan State do that this past season. Mel Tucker completely flipped the roster as going into his second year to pound the portal and really bring in a lot of transfers. LSU a couple years ago, when they went on that national title run, they had a ton of guys on that team that they just went all in on. And the payoff was obviously an undefeated historical season. And now they're struggling. So I think the whole concept and the whole strategy behind how you piece together a roster right now is so fascinating. And I think for this place, the end game and the mission doesn't change. It's about getting and attracting the best players at each position as you can. I think you just have to maybe do it a different way than you had in years past.
Nate, thank you so much, not only for coming on with us today, but your great coverage throughout the season. Still a lot to track, as we mentioned, with the portal and recruiting and everything to come with the coaching hires on the way. Thank you for coming on with us today and all your work throughout the season. We'll catch up again soon, but appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks, Brent.
Nate Mink, ladies and gentlemen, syracuse.com. little focus on football there, but standing by, who we'll bring in here momentarily, is our friend Mike Waters from syracuse.com. So get those basketball questions and comments on the brain now. But, I'll offer this before we bring in Mike. Something Nate just said in bringing up LSU. I mean, think about the college football landscape. Brian Kelly goes to LSU for $10 million a year. Mel Tucker was a career record of 17 and 14, $95 million extension at Michigan State. Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma to USC overnight, $11 million a year. Syracuse is supposedly swimming in the same seas as those schools, right? Technically, Power Five and kind of chasing the same thing, but I think they're not in the same sea. They're swimming in the ocean, and Syracuse is swimming in the kiddie pool at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see how they try to keep up with the Joneses here in the offseason. All right, what do you say we transition, talk some hoops? Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, live on the interwebs, the one and only Mike Waters, syracuse.com. Welcome to the program, Michael. Have you recovered from that 2 overtime instant classic Tuesday night?
Yeah, and my body clock was off. Like we had just changed like the time thing again. It was like waking up the next morning was really hard after being up so late for that one. But it was worth it. It was a great game.
It really was. And you mark these things by moments and games. And Mike, you've covered so many great games at the Dome. I've been to so many great games at the Dome. So they all kind of take on their own category. So that's my question. I didn't want to say like, is it in your top 5 all-time games or something like that? Let me just ask, like, where do you put a game like that, all things considered, on your list?
Oh, that was a fantastic game. It was a lot of fun. I really haven't sat back and thought, okay, is it like all-time top 5 home games or regular season? I don't think we're quite ready to put it up there with the 1990 game against Georgetown where John Thompson got ejected and Billy Owens goes to the line for 2 clutch free throws. And I don't think it's quite there with the 3 court storming celebrations against Pittsburgh in 2003. Right. So
or even like Duke, either the first Duke game, John Gillen's half court shot, like, are they on that level? Maybe not.
No,
but it's in its own special category. I would say.
It was fun. It was amazing. Yeah. I mean, it was an early season game against the name brand opponent like Indiana. The fact that you went to double overtime and the way it got there, especially the end of regulation sequence, doing the right thing by fouling up 3, sending the kid to the line, and he makes the first. A lot of people forget a lot of things have to happen before Indiana gets what it, is trying to shoot the moon to do, which is miss the second and then get the rebound and stick a game tie in. They got to have the kid make a free throw first, right. And he did.
Yeah.
And he hadn't been in the game long. He was a substitute guard. He was in there because Xavier Johnson had fouled out. So he makes the free throw, misses the second one absolutely perfectly. And that's hard to do. We say it all the time. Players don't know how to miss free throws.
That's right.
Half the time they bang it straight off the backboard, not even realizing that that's a violation, that it's an automatic dead ball if it doesn't hit the rim. They don't know what to do. They need to hire me. I'll teach you how to miss a free throw. So everything goes right. You trace Jackson Davis, great rebound, gets fouled. It was amazing that they got to overtime. So deflating for Syracuse, and then they come out and they kept their heads up and they played great in the first overtime, and kind of deflating again to go to the second overtime, and you're losing guys like Jesse Edwards and Cole Swider. It was a really cool game with a lot of twists and turns.
It was awesome. It was so much fun.
It was. And Syracuse desperately needed that win.
That's it. That was my next question, Mike, because look, it's December, but I wrote it and said it and tweeted it and all the things you got to do these days. You can't wake up December 1st, 3-4. It just wouldn't feel right. You certainly would have the opportunity, and not an opportunity, I guess that's the wrong way to put it. You're 3-4. Let's say that it goes the other way. You're 3-4. You got Florida State on Saturday. You got Villanova next week, a top 5 team. You got Georgetown after that. Because it's not about being 3-4. It's about potentially being like 3-6 or 3-7 if you continue to slide down a hill because they didn't have a good go of it in the Bahamas. It just felt like a night they needed to win. I don't want to call it a must win. I don't break that out that early in the season. But the feeling coming out of that was they needed to play well, win that game. And Mike, as you know, that's only the one home game they've got in what amounts to a 7-game stretch with the Bahamas and then the games in New York, Florida State, and Georgetown's an away game as well. So it felt like a big game. It felt like an important game, and they got by the hair on their chinny chin chin. But, man, it just goes back to that old expression, boy, I needed that, right?
They really did. Like you said, you don't want to fall to 3-4, which, by the way, would have been the first time Syracuse had ever been 3-4 after 7 games in Jim Boeheim's coaching tenure.
That's right.
So, a bad start. Yeah, a historically bad start at 3-4. So they managed to get the win. It was also a good win. It's over a name brand team from a big time conference. It's probably going to shape up as a pretty good win. It might not be quad 1 at the end of the year because it's a home game and not exactly how sure, how good Indiana is going to be in the Big Ten. There's a lot of teams in that conference, I think, that are much better than Indiana. So are they going to be a top 30 team in the net? I don't think so, but still it's a win that's going to look good. It's also a win that was on national TV. The ACC Big Ten Challenge was what people were watching this week if they were watching college basketball. Probably good to get a win in front of some eyeballs after that trip to the Bahamas, which, like you said, probably didn't go the way they wanted it to go. That they wanted to go down to the Bahamas and get at least a couple wins or at least look better. Jim Boeheim, a lot of times early in the season, is like he's more concerned with how his team's playing.
Right.
Well, in the Bahamas, they didn't play well, especially on defense. So that's a concern. And you also mentioned that where that game against Indiana sat in that schedule with the 3 neutral court games. You just came back from the Bahamas. The next 3 games are all away from home. 2 of them are true road games. It'd be really rough to lose your only home game in that 7-game stretch, and then add on to it. Before you went to the Bahamas, you lost your last home game.
That's right.
Colgate. So, man, out of that 8-game stretch, you only get 2 home games. You're going to drop them both. You can't have that happen.
Mike, I think we were all kind of waiting for this to happen. And what I mean by that is the anything you can do, I can do better game that Buddy and Jimmy were going to play. The competitive brothers that have done this throughout the years. I love the cover of our basketball preview this year, going back to the little Tykes days, the little plastic hoop that they'd play on in the basement as kids. And Buddy with 27 points, Jimmy with 26 points. They had 47% of Syracuse's 112 points in a double overtime game. And it's been fun to watch those two kind of interact with each other. And there's other players that have emerged that I want to ask you about here, but there was that moment there. And Buddy ended up getting the key baskets in the second overtime. And Jimmy actually had a chance to seal it at one point, but it was one of the free throws they actually missed. But he had so many big plays. He put Syracuse up 74-70, 81-72. He was open at the 3-point line, 4 of 9 that night. So we were all waiting for it, and we didn't have to wait long, right, for that game where those two were it. And we'll probably see it more as the season goes along, given the big roles they're playing. But that was that storyline that you kind of had ready to go at some point, and there it was. And what was their biggest game of the season thus far?
Yeah, and you desperately needed good games from both of them. It was really good to see for Jimmy because that last game at the Bahamas against Auburn, he looked overwhelmed. He wasn't able to keep up with Auburn's size and athleticism. I think he only had 3 points. They came very late in that loss to Auburn. He needed a bounce back game, and he got it in a big way with 26 points. Like you said, he made a lot of threes. I think he finished the game 4 of 9 from 3, but he got off to a really good start from long range. So it was a really important game for Jimmy, I think. He needed a game to, build back a little bit, maybe regain some confidence, because I could see how you might be a little shook after the way he looked against Auburn.
Mike, it has been incredible to see the development of Jesse Edwards so far. And I think we anticipated he was going to be a good player, right? But some big men develop at a slower rate. That's typically the position that develops the slowest, right? And while we had seen flashes of it a year ago, the trust that he's gotten from Jim Boeheim early, the foul trouble is something that they've been talking about and monitoring, and something he's certainly got to be wary of. But the confidence he's playing with, the points he's putting up, I think it's like 21, 17, 17 the past few games. And the element that brings this team, like, they need an inside presence. It was one of the things we kind of wondered about, with the transfers and how the roster transitioned from last year to this year. How have you seen this from Jesse? What's he been saying about it? What have the coaches been saying about how he's become this player? Maybe a little bit ahead of time in the development cycle, if you look at it.
You're going back to the summer and talking with Syracuse assistant Alan Griffin, you started to, hear in his voice, like when he would talk about Jesse, that he was excited about the development, that late last season, Jesse had been able to play more and contribute, and it had gained a little confidence. And finally, too, in the offseason of this year, it seemed like maybe his body had matured enough to the point where he was able to add on some weight and some muscle. But really, I think he just used the end of last season as a jumping off point, and really just elevated his game over the course of the summer. And you mentioned that big men take a while to develop, and it's true. I mean, a lot of kids might be 6'11" or 7 foot tall as a high school senior, but when they get to college, there's so much stuff that they you can't teach height, and that's why you recruit them. But then there's so much that they have to learn and stuff that you do have to teach them before they can actually play.
Exactly.
And I know Syracuse fans get frustrated, but I beg them all the time. Look around the country. And once you get past the Paulo Bancheros and the Chet Holmgrens, who are like total freaks of nature and probably, can go straight to the NBA if they were allowed to. They wouldn't even be in college ball. But most of the big men all around the country developed at their colleges. You didn't even hear about them as college freshmen. And it's okay. You're a Syracuse fan. You don't know who the kid at Florida State is as a freshman. You're worried about the kid at Florida State who's a junior or senior and is awesome. Same with, everybody, all these other big men. And to see Jesse develop as a junior, to me, you're kind of right on schedule. A big leap over last year, but because of COVID and everything, I think that might have slowed a lot of people's development.
Right.
So I think credit to him. I think he made up for some lost ground, lost time. And, he's become a defensive presence, which I kind of expected he would, with all the block shots, and he's so big and long in there. What I didn't really expect to see at this point in the season was how much of an offensive threat he's become in the low post. That's really the surprise with Jesse so far. And this team needs that because they got other guys who can shoot and they'll spread and they can put 4 out and 1 in now. And that one that they're putting in is a legitimate low post threat. You want to guard Jesse Edwards one-on-one? Okay. Good luck with that. I think that Syracuse now finally has a center who can make you pay if you go one-on-one against him. I think it's probably the first time we can say that since Rakeem Christmas was a senior.
Mike, switching over to the defensive side of the ball, and we'll close on this thought. Look, there's no question the defense has had trouble this year. I mean, teams have already scored more than 85 points, 3 times? Arizona State scored 84 points in a Syracuse win. It's been a liability. How that gets better will be interesting because it always does. The zone will always get better as the season goes, but they're kind of going to be this way too, if that makes sense. And where they find the balance there is going to be key. But I was intrigued, as I'm sure you were and others were. Jim Boeheim throws a little 1-1-3, 1-3-1, however you want to frame it. The other night, little wrinkle in the zone. Was that Indiana specific, or do you feel like maybe we could see that again?
I think they trotted it out to see how it might work. And again, they didn't play a different zone. They tweaked their zone.
Right.
Basically what they did is they had the one guard stop, be at the top of the key where the ball was. He was kind of on the ball. And the other guard kind of slunk down into the high post area just to put another body around the guy. It might have been sort of specific for Indiana. I think you were hoping that other than Miller Kopp, maybe they wouldn't hurt you from 3-point range. And I know they were really concerned about the high-low combination of Race Thompson and Trace Jackson Davis. And you saw how many times, even though Syracuse tried to stop them, that combination was just unbelievable in there for Indiana. So, yeah, I think they were tinkering with it specifically to Indiana, but I think also you kind of say, okay, did it work? Can we do this more? Or, maybe we just kind of have it in our pocket the next time we see another team that we think we can use it for. I think they're going to have to tinker with the zone all year long and be opponent specific. I mean, listen, that Indiana win was a relief and much needed relief, but a few things didn't go away. The defense still gave up 88 points in regulation. Indiana still shot like 40% from 3-point range. So no,
they shot 75% in the second half, right? if I'm not mistaken. I might be a little off there, but it was really good.
It was. They were making a lot of shots. That's when they were coming back from that 18-point deficit. You don't come back from 18-point deficit shooting under 50%. So no,
Right.
The defense remains a concern, even with the win over in Indiana. Rebounding remains a problem area. Indiana pounded them on the boards. What saved Syracuse is Syracuse was also a very good offensive team that was having a good offensive night. So they were matching Indiana, and they made up for the rebounds with 18 steals. So while Indiana was getting extra possessions on the board, Syracuse got its extra possessions with 18 steals. Now, you can't always count on a team turning it over as much as Indiana did, but I think there's going to be a lot of nights this year where that's how Syracuse is going to have to win a basketball game. Outscore your opponents and force them to commit some turnovers and convert those turnovers into easy buckets.
Well, no rest for the weary. Florida State up next. As we've seen, Leonard Hamilton loves to play 10, 11 guys, mix it up. Jim Boeheim even said the other night, they're going to need Symir Torrance. They're going to need Benny Williams to play well just to kind of keep pace with Florida State. Villanova around the corner, top 5 team in Madison Square Garden, and Georgetown to come. So plenty of great stuff on the way. Mike, appreciate you popping by today and all the great work you're doing there on syracuse.com and Mike's podcast, of course, folks. Make sure you subscribe to that. Watch and listen as he talks with some of the big names in the Syracuse basketball world. And we'll catch up again soon here on Orange Weekly, my friend.
That sounds good, Brent. Good talking to you. Have a great day.
You too, Michael. That is Mike Waters, ladies and gentlemen, syracuse.com. You read him, you know him, you love him, you follow him on Twitter, as you should be. And as we noted, there is a lot of good stuff on the way. We'll see if Syracuse keeps pace. And just a programming reminder that I'll be with you here on this same channel. If you're watching us on the Syracuse Orange Basketball Facebook page and Syracuse Orange Sports on YouTube, our post-game shows presented by Crouse Health, up and rolling. We're up pretty much right after the game. Within, get about 10, 15 minutes or so after the game, we'll pop on and do what we're doing here, talk with you, your comments and questions and just overall reaction. Certainly welcome. It was a great show the other night after the Indiana game. Everybody was just, loving it and loving what kind of game it was and reacting to it instantly. And that's what we love to do. But if you do miss the show live, this show, Orange Weekly, or any of our post-game shows, it does archive on YouTube. And we put it out on our social media channels. So make sure you're following at SYR Football and at SYR Basketball. Here on Facebook at Archives, you can see it there. And we'll put a post up on syracuse.com as well, where you can find the YouTube clip and watch it on your time. That is all for this week's edition of Orange Weekly, presented by Crouse Health. You guys have a great rest of your week. And I'll talk to you on Syracuse basketball postgame after the Orange take on Florida State Saturday, 4 o'clock tip time in that one.